just rough right there.
It's free. Well, that part of the operation. You feel like it was supposed to happen. Should have been the next day.
I know.
That's ridiculous. Yeah, I wouldn't even hook this.
I already have.
The only thing is when you go to hook it up, they won't go there.
Well,
Everything wrong. Yeah, it's until you put that in.
Well, it is supposed to share.
All right. Morning, everybody. We're reading Genesis chapter 29, lesson 135. Of course, this is dealing with that. Let me make sure we're on line here. We are. Jacob married Leah and Rachel. So he married both of them. You know, he had to. We didn't have to, I guess. But well, he did. I mean, he didn't want to get Rachel. All right. So good to see everybody. Happy New Year to everyone. It's, today we're at January 4th, and so good start to the new year. We had our singing was tonight, and then today this. All right. So let's jump into our questions. Yes or no? Did the scribes and Pharisees teach the law of Moses? Yes, they did. The next question, though, did they follow it? Did they follow that themselves? No, they did not. They did not follow the law themselves at all. Why did the scribes and Pharisees do good deeds? Matthew 23:5 says, not to be seen of God, but to be seen of men. Is what the reason they did it. Next one. What did God tell Moses to do when he approached the burning bush? Remove the shoes, the sandals, because he actually the holy ground. Next one, Esau. What was God's answer to Rebekah concerning the struggling of the babes within her? What did God tell her about them?
She had two nations in her.
That's right. She had two nations in her, and they would be the younger would serve the older, of course, and just a lot going on there. All right, bring us the next one. Did God tell Isaac A, to stay, or B, leave Canaan during the famine? Remember, think about Abraham. We know where he went, his family and everything. We see others. Remember the famine? They always went to where during a famine, it seems like? Always to Egypt. So this time, did Isaac go to Egypt or stay? Nope, he didn't go. He stayed, exactly right. God told him to stay, and he did so. And he didn't starve or nothing. Everything he had flourished, doubled, and it was just amazing as God would take care of him. Why did the Philistines stop the wells up with earth? It says dirt.
I prospered so much, and they envied him.
That's exactly right. And he prospered so much, it was crazy. They envied him. And Isaac was what we would call, you have oil man, we call well man, kind of. This is like what he did all the time, digging wells. And but they did that hoping that he would depart, that he would not call it his own place and leave. Next one, very good. What instruction did Isaac give to Esau? Let me see, we go back and get Isaac's, for the blessing. So what instruction I'll read the whole thing. Did Isaac give to Esau, who overheard these instructions? So what did he tell Esau to do before he thought he was going to die? He told Esau to go do something for him.
Go out and prepare him, kill the animal and bring it, make him a savory.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly right. He said, go out and kill that wild animal and bring back a savory stew for me. And then I'll give you your blessing. Exactly right. But who overheard those instructions? Mother Rebekah, exactly right. Next one, Jacob pretending to be Esau gave his father what reason for the speed in bringing the game?
God brought it to
He said, your God, it's kind of interesting, your God brought it to me. I mean, that's your God that did this. And that was a sin by itself right there, what Isaac did. Isaac said, the voice sounded, Jacob did. Isaac said the voice sounded like who? Jacob. And the hands were the hands of Esau. So confused him there for a moment, but he still gave blessing to Jacob. Traveling to his mother's family, what did Jacob use for a pillow one night? He used a stone, a rock, exactly right. When sleeping with his head on a stone, what did Jacob see in his dream? A ladder that came down from heaven. We're not going up, it came down from heaven. But he saw angels doing what? Descending and ascending up and down. And who was the ladder, did the Bible tell us in the New Testament? Jesus Christ, exactly right, Lord Jesus Christ. Go on to the next one. And that's it. All right, so let's jump into our Jacob is going to marry Leah and Rachel, Genesis 29. As it brings to our text this morning, I'll just tell you right now, God has a plan for Jacob. Remember we said that there was a lot written, about 15 chapters about Abraham. There's this tiny bit about Isaac, like a chapter and a half. Really one chapter really about what we learn about him. And then a whole bunch more chapters about Jacob. We know that he's going to, God is using this moment to refine Jacob. Jacob is a very worldly man. And we already saw that he's one that sinned, that did things against what he wasn't supposed to. And we see that God's going to change him. God wants to bring Jesus through Jacob, but Jacob has to change to get to that moment and that time. And it's not going to be fast. It's going to take time. So God has this plan for him. He's going to really start refining him. And in the instance God's refining fire is a man named Laban. Laban is who he's going to use to do this. And that's the brother of who? Remember the brother? It's brother of Rebecca. So we go all the way back, exactly right. And this is something we, see throughout the Bible. God uses circumstances, situations, and sometimes even people to straighten people out or to get them where they need to be. So they're looking to the will of God and following it. So we begin with the molding of Jacob, is what we're going to see here. That's supposed to be 1 through 8. We're not going to, there's no 89 verses there. We're not going to read that part. It's like, whoa, I just saw that. So go ahead and read, go ahead and read Genesis 29, 1 through 8, so we'll read that for us, please.
When Jacob went on his journey, he came to the land of the people of the east. And he looked, and he saw a well in the field. And behold, there were 3 flocks of sheep lying by it. For out of their well they watered the flocks. A large stone was on the well's mouth. Now all the flocks would be gathered there, and they would roll the stone from the well's mouth, water the sheep, and put the stone back into place on the well's mouth. And Jacob said to them, my brethren, where are you from? And they said, we are from Haran. And then he said to them, do you know Laban and the son of Noah? And they said, we know it. So he said to them, it is well. And they said, is it well? And look, his daughter Rachel is coming with the sheep. They said, look, it is still high day. It is not time for the cattle to be gathered together. Water the sheep and go feed them. But they said, we cannot until all the flocks are gathered together, and they have rolled the stone from the well's mouth. Then we water the sheep.
Thank you. So a couple things in here. First I'll just say something about the well and the rock. There's different thoughts to it. We look at here, at first we think it's just a rock that's over a well so it doesn't get dirty or anything, and you just roll it off. But then towards the end when it says here that it says we can't do it until all the sheep get here. And so on. Others believe that it was actually a water that would come up out of the ground and that you would remove the rock. So it would seep out, of course, with the rock there, but not really flow. And you remove the rock and the water would come and fill up like a little trough area thing around it. And we don't know if that's really the case, but that's different scholars think different things that they found over time. So to get to this, Jacob arrives in the vicinity of Haran, and as Providence would have it, Laban's daughter, Rachel, of course we know, later becomes his wife, just happens to be approaching to her water the father's flock. And that's what the women did back then. We would see they would do, the men would bring in the animals and the women would water them. I'm sure Jacob had probably heard the story of his grandfather, Abraham, without a doubt, where he sent his servant and so on. So he probably heard the story 100 times. But now he's actually getting to live out his own story. And he's actually getting to see God moving, basically to ensure that his will comes to pass, as we find this here. But just because Jacob's getting to actually see this happening now, as we're finding him actually, remember he's already talked to God, to the Lord, Jesus, for the first time, but it doesn't mean he understands all of God's providence. It doesn't mean he understands it yet, or that it's even going to be there, that God's going to provide for him. Because remember, Jacob is, we'd say, pretty carnally minded right now. He's very worldly in his ways and his thoughts. So Jacob probably doesn't even consider how God has led him to this place and how God has orchestrated basically perfectly to work out where he will meet Rachel and she would become his wife. But as we look at this, remember, some say, well, why would we say he's worldly or carnally, very carnal in his ways? He came from a godly family, did he? Well, really, was Isaac and Rebecca, were they really a great example for him? That they weren't. We see that. And we know that they had their good points, without a doubt, but we see a lot of problems in their family too. And we see things happening. So here, as we see with Rachel, what a perfect time coming to water the flocks, and this is all God's providence, providing these things. Not that he's, treating her like a robot, orchestrating her there, but he's orchestrating the events, basically the will, everything that can come from this. The reason I say this is because, we don't see Jacob, as I said about being the way he is, we don't see Jacob react the way Abraham's servant did. Y'all remember what happened when Abraham, the servant, went there and he saw the woman, and he saw Rebekah, and then he said, what do you do first of all, immediately? Who do you think? Who did he talk to? God. He talked to God and prayed to him. So when he did this, he immediately, when it actually says he worshiped. He worshiped and praised the Lord, as we see here, and he gave all the glory to God. We don't see that at all with Jacob. Not one bit, nowhere. And that's where we see the difference of how far Jacob is removed from his grandfather Abraham and where he needs to get back to and what he needs to find himself. So let's go ahead and continue here. Let's look at verses 9 through 12. If someone will read that for us, please.
Now while he was still speaking with him, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. And it came to pass when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, then that Jacob went near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth, and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. Then Jacob kissed Rachel and lifted up his voice and wept. And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's relative, and that he was Rebekah's son. So she ran and told her father.
Thank you. So here we get to see the first meeting of Jacob and Rachel. Once again, kind of like Rebekah and Isaac, a big love story in the Bible. It's almost it's kind of almost like love at first sight, kind of the same thing we see here. So Jacob rolls the stone away from the well so that she can basically, take care of the sheep, water them, and he not only does move the stone, but he actually, what does it say he does? He waters the sheep, exactly right, and that's unheard of. You don't see that of the men doing that. The women would come out there with him, like I said earlier. So basically, Jacob is doing what his mother did for Abraham's servant. That's basically what's happening here, the same thing. Some commentators say different things about it, which kind of blows my mind. Some say he was showing off to show his strength and power to move the rock. I said it's probably not that difficult the way they had it set up to move that rock, and they can make it very round. Or that he was trying to basically make a good impression at this point as we see this. And he maybe was, but I think he was just strongly attracted to Rachel, and he was going to do anything good for her. And that's really what we see in this moment. It's not like he was doing this for God, because once again, he doesn't mention God at all anywhere in here. You think back to verse 11, right here, we just saw here, we read, it says, then Jacob kissed Rachel and lifted up his voice and wept. This here, as we look at this here, remember, as we said, the servant of Abraham, when he saw Rebekah and everything worked out, and she told who he was and things were looking good, he thanked and worshiped God. Where Jacob's basically just happy, looking for who she is, and that he's happy that he found her. Some say, oh, look, you already kissed her. Now, don't read into that at all. Some read it in that so on. What was a very common thing in the Mideastern back then and still today? They kiss you as a greeting. That would be a greeting. It used to be on the cheek. We see a greeting there. It wasn't just an affection or passionate kiss, as some might think. So we see Laban then is going to greet Jacob a little later on. He's going to treat him the same way. Guess how he's going to greet him? With a kiss. And that's what they do, and what we see there as we get down the road to it. Let's raise verse 13 and 14. And so we're going to read that for us, please.
Then it came to pass when Laban heard the report about Jacob, his sister's son, that he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his house. So he told Laban all these things, and Laban said to him, surely you are my bone and my flesh, and he stayed with him for a month.
Thank you. Stayed with him for a month. I mean, just stayed there. So basically meaning he stayed there for a month, not, trying to decide what was going to go on, what was going to happen. But Jacob goes back home to Rachel, of course, meets Laban, as we saw there. At first, everything seems to be going how? Good. We might say great. It seems to be going great. He's with his mom's family, which is a great thing. A month, you get a lot of time to catch up, don't you? And I can imagine, I doubt he went to that point. So what are you doing here? Oh, me and my mom conceived this idea to basically take my brother's blessing and everything with it and leave my father out and just get here. That was not it at all. Of course, we know that God had made the plan that Jacob would receive all this, and we see moving that way. But you can just see the kind of stories that probably went on. He met the girl he knows he wants to marry, and we learned that. And we see that here with Rachel. His uncle has put him up and given him a place to stay, but it's not going to last. That kind of kindness and closeness is going to change once he asks for Rachel for her hand in marriage. And we know that Jacob figures some other things, not Jacob, Laban figures some other things out here that he needs to do to take care of both his daughters. And once again, we look at this and we go, what is going on with these families? They're continually marrying more than one person. And we know that God, does that mean it's okay? No, not at all. God didn't like that, didn't want that, but it happens anyways, and God deals with that the way He did with them. And so we move on to our next area here, and that is verses 15 through 18. If someone will read that, please.
Then Laban said to Jacob, because you are my relative, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what should your wages be? Now Laban had two daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah's eyes were delicate, but Rachel's was beautiful of form and appearance. Now Jacob loved Rachel, so he said, I will serve you 7 years for Rachel, your younger daughter.
Thank you. Appreciate that. How many of us here would jump straight up to 7 years? I'll serve you guys like, how pretty she is, or how nice she is, or how kind she is, how well she can cook. That's not what it is here. 7 years, remember, 7 is an important thing in the Bible. And we see that, in every 7 years things will be refreshed. Kind of the way to look at it, be turned over, dealing with the fields and so on. So this basically would be common to them. So he does this. Jacob's willing to work for Laban for 7 years if he can marry Rachel, and Laban agrees. But then what does Laban do? Does he just give him Rachel? He cheats him. He cheats him here in this moment, gives him Leah for a wife. In other words, Jacob, here's where God starts to refine him. He is reaping what he has already done. Remember that. He did this, and or what he's already sown, I guess the best way to put it. He's already done this, to his brother, his father, even though God said this would happen, and he never told him to do it this way. I think it's interesting that it comes from Rebecca. She's one that was a deceiver, really, when you look at a lot of things she did. And now here comes the same family that she came from, and we see once again what? Deceivers, really deception happening. And people will be like, why didn't Leah just marry somebody else? Well, first of all, we'll talk about what happens here with her eyes, what that means. But also, remember, they didn't want him to marry outside of the family, and maybe nobody would take her, or nobody wanted her, as we see here. So the Bible initially contrasted Rachel and Leah based on their appearance, is what we find here. We're told that Rachel was beautiful, but Leah had delicate eyes. The Hebrew here is rak, which is R-A-K. When you look at it, it literally means tender or weak. But you also can continue with understanding what that is. Some say it means big doe eyes, like big eyes. Some say that she was cross-eyed. Different scholars, depending on what you look at. And another interesting thing, what I thought was when you look at the history of the people then during that time, they really, when occasionally someone would be born with pale blue eyes, and most people think that's pretty, beautiful. They looked at it as not attractive. It wasn't incumbent in any way whatsoever. And so if that was the case, whichever it was, Rachel was considered more attractive than Leah. And maybe there was a hard time, marrying her off. We don't know the whole answer to it. But we do know that he ends up marrying her and marries her and Rachel both. And it's interesting, though, because in Proverbs 31:30 tells us not to base our relationships on looks. Even though that's what we do, we look at people, we learn to love the person, and we find everything about them, their feelings, their personality. We fall in love with all of that. And that's what we see. For the Bible says this, and it makes it very clear. So we're going to read that for us, please.
Charm is deceitful, and beauty is passing. But a woman who fears the Lord, she shall be praised.
Thank you. This is coming. Who wrote this? Proverbs. Who's that? David wrote this Proverbs 31:30. We see this and understand as we look at him and we look at his son Solomon. When we think about Solomon too, think about Solomon, and all the wives that he had. And what we see here, David also had a few. We see his concubines and so on. And it's very important to understand this, that what's happening here and the importance of the beauty. The beauty, as we say all the time, inside. Look to that first. And because someone may marry somebody just because they're pretty. Or even vice versa, a woman marry a man because he's good looking, you know, because we see that. And if you don't find out what they're about, you may end up with what? Somebody really bad, you know, that you don't want to be with. And that's why he says, well, very important, look to the one who fears the Lord. That's what we would see. So Jacob, once again, a carnal man in time, he was attracted to Rachel. But if we play, you know, Paul Harvey, you know, he can look, there's the rest of the story. We see that Leah, or Leah, however you want to say it, was actually the one that ended up being blessed by God. It was her. She was blessed completely, not Rachel. She had several children long before Rachel ever did. Secondly, Rachel is the one in Genesis 31 that, interesting, remember, Rebecca sends him there. Of course, she's scared her son Esau's going to kill him, but she wants to send him there, and so does Isaac, to keep him from marrying into what? And the Canaanites. Why? What did the Canaanites do? Who did they worship?
They would follow.
Bel, these different gods, and all this and everything. Guess what Rachel has? Rachel has for her family these idols that she worships. And, you know, and we see that's a beginning showing us something about Rachel as we read there. In fact, in Genesis 31, verse 19, it mentions it. Someone want to read that, please.
Now Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and Rachel had stolen the household idols that were her father's.
Thank you. So her father had these idols. She took them. She's probably used to him doing things with them and so on. And why would you steal something like that unless you were what? Expecting maybe something from them, right? As we would see that. So it's very important to look at here as we see this. It says a lot about her. Thirdly, Rachel dies before Leah does. We read Genesis 35 talks about it. And probably the most important thing is Leah, that through Leah, the line of who comes through her?
Judas.
Exactly, we see Jesus Christ. Also, we understand, you know, going to come from her, not Rachel. Leah was the mother of Judah, and that's what we just saw there, the whole mother of Judah. And so it's so important to see that, you know, in our mind, we have ideas of what we think is right and what we want. Doesn't mean God's not going to let us do them, but it doesn't mean that's going to be the will of God, what he wants. And that's what we see with Leah, what we find. Jacob had a plan, but so did God. And again, we see God's will, probably the will of man, always, just like we see all throughout the Bible. And it happens every time, and God's ways are not our ways. So Jacob begins to reap what he sows, as we said. And we're going to see it in these verses here. I'll read this. Verses 19 through 30, a lot to read. I'll go ahead and read it. And Laban said, "It is better that I give her to you than I should give her to another man. Stay with me." So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed only a few days to him because of the love he had for her. Then Jacob said to Laban, "Give me my wife, for my days are fulfilled, that I may go into her." Now we got to catch this first of all. So he worked 7 years before he even gets a wife. Now think about that for a moment. It says, "And Laban gathered together all the men of the place and made a feast. And now it came to pass in the evening that he took Leah his daughter and brought her to Jacob, and he went into her. And Laban gave his maid Zilpah to his daughter Leah as a maid. So it came to pass in the morning that behold, it was Leah, and he said to Laban, 'What is this you have done to me? Was it not for Rachel that I served you? Why then have you deceived me?'" Here it goes. You know, my thought is this. Does it ring in his head? Maybe I'm getting what I've done before. I mean, all those 7 years waiting for this moment. You know, and during those 7 years, we can see the way he reacts to the situation here, that he's being humble. He's being humble, definitely without a doubt. God's working through him. It says, "And Laban said, 'It must not be done so in our country, to give the younger before the firstborn.'" That was his answer for this. Fulfill her week, and we will give you this one also, for the service which you will serve with me still another 7 years. Then Jacob did so, fulfilled her week. So he gave him his daughter Rachel as wife also. And Laban gave him his maid Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as a maid. Then Jacob also went into Rachel, and also loved Rachel more than Leah. And he served with Laban still another 7 years. When the Lord saw that Leah was unloved. So in other words, he must have given all of his attention mainly to Rachel, not Leah. It says he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. So Leah conceived and bore a son, and she called his name Reuben, for she said, "The Lord has surely looked on my affliction. Now therefore my husband will love me." Then she conceived again and bore a son, and said, "Because the Lord has heard that I am unloved, he has therefore given me this son also." And she called his name Simon, or Simeon. And then it goes on, verse 34. She conceived again and bore a son, and said, "Now this time my husband will become attached to me, because I have borne him 3 sons." So It tells us a lot. She's having these children, and he's thinking, what about her? Really not much at all. Therefore his name was called Levi. And she conceived again and bore a son and said, now I will praise the Lord. Therefore she called his name Judah. That's where we see Jesus come through, exactly right what was said earlier. Then she stopped doing what? Stopped bearing children, yes. So, this is where we find the deception of Laban really at work in this moment. He worked 7 years, was married to Leah, and then after a week, he was able to receive Rachel. But he had to work how many years for both of them? Well, he already worked 7. He had to work how many more?
7.
7 more again. Now, Laban, this is what's interesting, I think. Laban said, in the beginning, why do you think just because you're my family, I would not pay you something? You're going to work for free. Really, Laban took advantage of him, didn't he? I mean, really, when you see this, we don't hear any pay or whatever. He's giving him a house, maybe all this, giving him a wife. And then we said, what's going on with all this? So it's really interesting to find this. So Laban is going to be the primary source of Jacob's troubles for the next 20 years. For the next 20 years, his father-in-law is going to be a problem, as we see in this moment. It says, and actually, even beyond that, actually, we're going to see a little later, but Laban's going to cheat him and swindle him and get 14 years of labor out of him and be a thorn in his side for being a percentage of the rest of his life. That's just the way that God works sometimes. Not that God wanted those things to happen. God didn't make Laban make him work for 7 years. That's Laban's choice. But God allowed these things to happen. We are put in a situation with people in order sometimes to really teach us about ourselves, teach us more about ourselves than maybe we even know at the time. It's hard to deal with someone who has, the same character flaws as you. And that's what we saw here. Jacob had these character flaws, and so did that of Laban. And that's what we're seeing here. Jacob deceived his own father and pretended to be Esau. And now his uncles pulled the ultimate trick on Jacob again. He's worked 7 years of his life, and we got to understand this. The people say, well, he must not pay while he was doing this. It's without pay. He's not making pay. His payment was his spouse. That's what we see here. And it was only for room, board, and a promise that he would get to marry Rachel, of course. But Laban pulled the fast one. Jacob, of course, wants to have Rachel. We see 7 years of that. So how many of us would have been like, that's 14 years of my life. You're crazy. And just say, I'll just keep Leah. I don't want Rachel anymore. But those whole 7 years, he was desiring to be with who? Rachel. And we see that. And so, or somebody said, forget it. We're just gonna forget the parents. We're gonna run off and go somewhere else on our own. Well, they didn't do that back then. That's not the way things work. And we see this because once you gave your word, what was it? You were binding. It was binding. It was a covenant. It was a covenant like we saw the covenants with God. So he actually really did. He really did love Rachel. We see it throughout this. That's a lesson for us also, that when a man or a woman is willing to put up with years of hardship, they must really love each other, huh? Because some marriages are like that. It's just hardship, 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 hardship. And keep praying for that marriage to do what? To get better. And that's what we see. Mom, go ahead.
I had always thought that Rachel, he had to work 7 years and then get Rachel, but it sounds like he got her after it fulfilled Leah's week.
Yes.
He got her, then had to work 7 years.
Yes, exactly right. That's exactly what, yeah, because he worked the 7 years first expecting to get Rachel, and he got Leah, and then he had to work, he basically had to fulfill her week, and then he got Rachel immediately, and then had to work 7 years for that. And that's exactly how it goes there. And it is a little confusing when you start thinking about it, but when you read it there, it's what it shows, as we see. So verse 31 through 35. Where are we at? 31. 31 through 35, I haven't read that yet, have I? Nope, so someone go ahead and read that, please.
When the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. So Leah conceived and bore a son, and she called his name Reuben.
Oh, did we read this?
Yeah,
I read that.
I think you did.
I'm going to the next one. There we go. Okay, hold on a minute. I'm already past that. Let's look at this here. A couple of things that I want us to see here before, I'm almost out of time. I want us to realize some things here that, that God makes it very clear, that if you look to him, you follow him, he'll take care of you. But also there are times when we may not be looking to God the way we should, like Jacob wasn't looking to God the way he should, but God still has a plan. And things are going to move in the way God wants them to move. And sometimes we may not agree with it. We may not want it to be that way. But we need to understand God has a way. And God's way will always supersede bands. Always. We need to understand it 100% of the time. And so to see that, as we know a couple things I want us to see here, let's go ahead and someone go ahead and read. Yeah, go ahead and read Hebrews 12, 1 through 3.
Therefore, we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and hath sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. For consider him who endured such hostility from sinners against himself, lest you become weary and discouraged in your souls.
Thank you. So here we see as Christians, we are, this good talking in the book of Hebrews, we understand that we're to endure hardships, and sometimes we endure them as discipline. Not that we've done something wrong. Discipline can be used in many different ways. Some for someone who's done wrong, some just like discipline our body, keep us moving forward in the right direction. I've heard some say, well, Jesus only endured it for those, for those moments on the cross. That's it. No way. Think about it. Jesus came to this earth as God. Came to this earth and had to become a human being for you and I. He knew from day one. He knew from a baby. He knew that his ultimate goal was to do what? To die on the cross. Now you think about it, 33 years living on this earth, and that is your goal. That is what you're told you're going to do. And even when you get to the last moment, we see the human side of him in the Garden of Gethsemane. Does Jesus ask his Father, if there's some way to let this go some other way, let's do it. Did he do that? Definitely. But he still did his Father's will. Because see, this is what's going to happen when Jesus understood. No matter, and this is what we give back Jacob, no matter us, even us today, no matter what humans think, God's will always be done. It's always going to happen. And that's what we see. Look at verses 7 and 11 also. A little more of this Hebrews 12. If someone read that for us, please.
If you endure chastening, God deals with you as with sons. For what son is there whom the Father does not chasten? But if you are without chastening, of which all have become partakers, then you are illegitimate and not sons. Furthermore, we have had human fathers who corrected us, and we paid them respect. Shall we not much more readily be in subjection to the Father of spirits and live? For they indeed for a few days chastened us as seemed best to them, but he for our profit, that we may be partakers of his holiness. Now no chastening seems to be joyful for the present, but painful. Nevertheless, afterward it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it.
Thank you. The last part of Hebrews 12 is so important, verse 11. Basically, God's saying, is his will's going to be done. We're going to be a part of that will. The question is, how are we going to accept it? What are we going to decide? He says, once you're trained by it and you understand how God works, is it peaceful? Is that what he says? It is. Notice, peaceful fruit of righteousness. And that's what we find. As a child, one of the parents may have said sometime, you probably heard this, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. Probably nobody hadn't heard that before. I know I heard it several times, and it's called the hard way for a reason, and that's what we see that. But here's what I believe we get to God too, and not the things that come up and happen in our lives that hurt us and different things, and we see that even their sins can be painful. But God says, I show you how to do this, and if you do it that way, this world, while you live on this earth, it'll be more peaceable if you do it my way. And we see if we decide to go against God a little bit, things aren't the same. So whom the Lord we see loves, he disciplines without a doubt. And so Laban was exactly what Jacob needed in his life. It was going to change him. Even though it was a terrible moment when he did, but he needed it. I actually think that most of the time, when things are happening in our lives, we attribute it usually to an attack from the devil. When things happen in our lives, we go, get that devil away from me, you crazy thing. What are you doing? What are you doing to me? But here it is. Have you ever thought that sometimes this may come in a way for God trying to get our attention? Trying to get our attention. And, and we see to make us move in the right direction of where we are. Not because he hates us or because he's mad, but because he loves us. And some say, I don't know about that. How many of us like parents, have disciplined our children somewhere, have done something, And we've done it, what, out of mean and hatred? Is that what it was? What was it out of? It was. And it's really hard for children to understand that until they become a parent. Once they become a parent, they look at you and go, I get that now, okay? You think about that and see that. So here it's all about molding as we see this happening. The second thing we need to understand here is that God is not the author of sin. Jacob has sinned in his life, tricked his father, done a lot of wrong things, and he was paying for some of those things. Just because we sin and we ask God to forgive us, does that mean there's not sometimes going to be some kind of punishment for that? There's going to be consequences sometimes. Not always, but sometimes there will be. So everyone involved is in some way, and none of us is pleasing to God while we're sinning. But here's the thing. God can use our ways to make us better. And in fact, we see Romans 8. Romans 8, great verse 8, 29, 20 and 29. If someone read that, please.
And we know that all things work together for the good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. For whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brethren.
Basically what this verse is telling us is not according to our purpose, but to his. And that's where we see this happening when we understand it. And it's all, if we do things for purpose of God, he says everything's good. Everything can come from God good. Which brings us to the final one, Genesis chapter 50, verse 20. Someone go and read that for us, please.
But as for you who meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring it about as it is this day, to save many people alive.
Goes back to Jacob. What man, what human being, really, when you look to it, there are evil people out there, don't get me wrong, but most people don't intend to be evil, do they? It's not the normal thing, or intend to even bring evil upon others, or even upon themselves, or whatever. But here's what happens. When evil is present, God can take that and use it for good somehow. He can move things in the right order. Think about Nebuchadnezzar. We always think about Nebuchadnezzar, the king Nebuchadnezzar. He was a bad man at that time. Bad man. But did God use him for good quite a bit? He did. He used him for a lot of good. And we see that. And so he uses things and events and people to mold us, to shape us, and to discipline us and get us back on track. And that's exactly what we see with Jacob here. This is just the beginning of Jacob. We're going to see Jacob grow immensely. Just grow, and be a towering, strong person, a man of God that we'll see. And it's just a great thing to see that family went back from where Abraham had it to where it would get to that point with Jacob. All right, we're going to close there. I've got a minute and a half left. Anybody, any comments or questions? Doug, go ahead.
Well, the thing about Jacob and Rachel was that toward the end of the childbearing, Joseph came through Rachel, and so that tied Rachel and Jacob together for life, because that was both of their favorites.
Exactly. And it's interesting because there comes favoritism again, even though they've gone through all this time of being better, getting better, and we see it. And so we looked at that. So I only have one child right here. We all have a favorite, don't we? So, no, I'm kidding. So you are sitting there going, is it me? No, but, so we think this. Basically, I want to close with this. When we really look at it, everybody said to choose the easy way or the hard way. Jacob chose the hard way. He really did. He chose the hard way, but he learned that over time that hardness became softened and that's kind of where his heart was, but it became softened. God continued to mold it, and he was just a man of passion for God. And as we said, I don't believe Joseph, without a doubt, would have turned out the way he did unless it was an example of his parents. And when we get to that point with him. All right, we're going to close there. Appreciate your time. Thanks.